You waited, and what started as a few quiet days slowly stretched into weeks, then months. The silence grew heavier over time, almost loud enough to make you question everything about yourself. And then, without any warning or explanation, they return. Just like that, they show up again. No apology, no context, just their presence, as if nothing ever happened. But what most people don't realize is that when an avoidant comes back after a long period of silence, it is never random, never casual, and never without meaning. Something has already shifted within them internally, and if you misread that moment, you can easily lose your emotional footing. One of the most common mistakes people make in these situations is taking the silence personally. When someone pulls away, stops replying, or disappears without saying a word, it's natural to turn inward and start questioning yourself. You replay conversations, second-guess your behavior, and wonder if you were too much, not enough, or somehow the reason they left. That loop of self-doubt can feel convincing, but it's rarely the truth. Their withdrawal was not primarily about you, but about what was happening inside them that they didn't know how to manage. For many avoidant individuals, emotional closeness doesn't register as comfort the way it does for others. Instead, it can feel intense, overwhelming, and even threatening to their internal sense of balance. They are not disconnected from emotion. In fact, they often feel things deeply, sometimes more than they know how to handle. The difference is in how they respond to that intensity. Rather than staying with it, they instinctively create distance. Emotional intimacy activates a kind of internal pressure they don't have the tools to regulate. So when connection deepens or vulnerability increases, their system pushes them toward withdrawal. That's why the shift can seem so sudden from the outside. One moment there is flow, consistency, and emotional engagement, and the next, they pull away without explanation. But internally, it is not sudden at all. It builds gradually as discomfort accumulates until distancing feels like the only way to regain control over themselves. What's important to understand is that this withdrawal is not a calculated rejection. It is a coping strategy. Most avoidant individuals are not trying to hurt you or send a message through silence. In many cases, they actively avoid confrontation because direct communication feels even more exposing. Instead of saying they are overwhelmed or need space, they disappear because silence feels safer than emotional honesty. It allows them to retreat without having to face vulnerability or explain feelings they are still struggling to understand themselves. But while silence protects them from discomfort, it creates confusion on the other side, where it often feels like abandonment without explanation or closure. And when there is no clarity, your mind tries to create its own. You start filling in the gaps with assumptions, and most of those assumptions turn inward. You begin to believe it must be something you did or something you lacked. But their silence is not a measurement of your worth, your value, or your ability to be loved. It is a reflection of their emotional capacity in that moment, a capacity that was limited long before you entered their life. Unless they actively work on it, that limitation tends to repeat across relationships, regardless of who is in front of them. Understanding this doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior, but it does mean freeing yourself from carrying responsibility for something that was never yours to fix. It can feel like you've been completely erased, like your presence meant so little that it was easy for them to disappear without a trace. And when that happens, the mind doesn't stay neutral. It starts building its own explanations to fill the silence. Maybe they never really cared. Maybe it meant nothing to them. Maybe you were replaced without a second thought. These are the kinds of painful conclusions that begin to form when there is no clarity, no closure, and no communication. But what you don't see in that moment is the internal world they retreat into. Because silence does not mean emptiness. It only means invisibility from your side, not absence of experience on theirs. Avoidant individuals don't process emotions as they unfold. Instead of expressing what they feel in real time, they often suppress it, delay it, or push it away entirely. But emotions don't disappear just because they are ignored. They accumulate, they linger, and eventually they resurface in quieter, less visible ways. So when an avoidant withdraws, it is not necessarily the end of their emotional connection to you. In many cases, it becomes the point where they are finally alone with their feelings, just not in a way you can see. In that silence, they replay interactions, conversations, and moments of closeness. They remember how you made them feel, the comfort you offered, and even the intensity that may have overwhelmed them at times. But instead of expressing any of this, they process it internally. They try to make sense of their reactions in private. Why did it feel so intense? Why did it start to feel uncomfortable? Why did I feel the need to pull away? These are questions that rarely get spoken out loud, but they are very real in their internal world. The difference is that they don't move toward resolution through communication. They sit with it. They distance themselves not just physically, but emotionally, as a way to regulate what feels overwhelming. In that state, thinking becomes safer than feeling, and reflection becomes a substitute for engagement. What makes this even more confusing is that they can still miss you while remaining distant. From the outside, missing someone usually leads to action, to reaching out, to reconnecting. But for an avoidant, missing you can actually intensify internal conflict, because missing you also means acknowledging attachment, and attachment is exactly what activates discomfort. So instead of moving closer, they may withdraw even further, trying to reduce the emotional pressure rather than act on it. This is why their silence can feel so final, even when it isn't. It is not forgetting. It is unresolved processing without expression. Another layer is pride and self-protection. Once they have created distance, coming back means reopening something they worked to shut down. It means facing emotions they avoided and risking emotional exposure again. So even when thoughts of you are present, even when feelings exist beneath the surface, they may still choose silence because it feels safer than vulnerability. From your perspective, this creates a painful illusion. You see absence and assume indifference. You assume that if you mattered, there would be action. And in many situations, that assumption makes sense. But in avoidant patterns, emotional experience does not always translate into visible behavior. What this really highlights is the gap between feeling and expression. They may still think about you, still reflect on what happened, still feel the weight of the connection, but none of that guarantees communication or consistency. And while it can be grounding to understand that you were not forgotten or emotionally insignificant, it is equally important not to confuse internal reflection with relational effort. Thinking about someone is not the same as showing up for them. Memory is not the same as commitment. This is why clarity matters more than speculation. You cannot build stability on what is unspoken. You can understand their inner world without making it your emotional responsibility. Because at the end of the day, Your value is not defined by how often you are remembered in silence, but by how consistently you are chosen in reality. It feels like they've crossed a line they normally avoid, even if they don't fully show it on the surface. But this is where things often get misunderstood. Their return should not be romanticized or taken as automatic proof of change. Yes, coming back usually means there was internal conflict, but it doesn't mean that conflict has been resolved. The same fears, the same patterns, and the same discomfort with emotional closeness are often still present underneath. What changes is not necessarily who they are, but which force wins in that moment, the fear of closeness or the pull toward connection. And when they return, it simply means connection briefly won. This is where people often misread the situation. The return gets interpreted as a turning point, as if everything will now be different, clearer, or more stable. But in reality, the internal struggle doesn't end there. It continues quietly underneath their behavior. Coming back is not the conclusion of that cycle, it is just one movement within it. When you understand this, you stay more emotionally grounded. You stop seeing their return as a full reset of the relationship and start seeing it as a reflection of their internal state. It is about what is happening inside them, not just about what is happening between you. Their return doesn't automatically mean emotional availability, consistency, or readiness. What it does indicate is that the connection left an impact. Something about it stayed with them long enough to create tension, reflection, and eventually movement back toward you. But impact alone is not enough to build something stable. Without awareness and real change on their side, the same push and pull dynamic can repeat because the root issue hasn't been fully addressed. So when they come back, it is less of a clean beginning and more of a continuation of everything they've been internally struggling with in your absence. In most cases, their return is not loud or emotionally open. It is careful, controlled, and gradual. Instead of stepping directly back into emotional depth, they tend to test the space first. They observe how you respond, how much has changed, and whether the emotional atmosphere still feels intense or overwhelming. This isn't manipulation in a deliberate sense, but a form of self-protection. After distance, jumping straight into emotional closeness would feel too abrupt for them, so they ease in slowly. A message here, a casual check-in there, something light enough to feel safe. From your side, this can easily be mistaken for progress. You see contact again, you feel movement, and naturally it feels like things are improving. But internally, they may still be in an evaluation phase rather than a commitment phase. They are not fully re-entering the relationship yet. They are assessing whether re-entry feels emotionally safe. Every response you give becomes part of that assessment, not in a calculated way, but as feedback for their nervous system. How you react, how much pressure they feel, and how emotionally intense the exchange becomes all influence whether they move closer or pull back again. This is also where imbalance often forms. One person is hoping for reconnection, while the other is still deciding whether reconnection feels manageable. That gap creates confusion, especially when their behavior alternates between warmth and distance. It is not always about lack of care, but about inconsistent capacity for emotional engagement. They can show interest without being fully available, and they can feel something without being able to sustain it in a steady way. And while they are testing the connection, something else is happening at the same time. You are being revealed to yourself. You start noticing your own patterns and uncertainty. Whether you overextend yourself to keep them close, Whether you abandon your boundaries to avoid losing them, or whether you remain steady despite the inconsistency. This stage exposes not only how they handle closeness, but how you respond when closeness is uncertain. The key shift comes when you stop confusing temporary engagement with real stability. Their return is not the finish line, and their presence alone is not proof of change. What matters is consistency over time, not intensity in moments. And when you understand that, you stop building emotional certainty on behavior that is still in testing mode. They are not just reacting to your presence when they return. They are also reading the emotional atmosphere you create in that moment. Your intensity, your tone, your patience, your expectations, and your overall emotional stability all become part of what they unconsciously register. When your reaction is highly emotional, urgent, or focused on immediate clarity, it can trigger their instinct to pull back. Not because your feelings are invalid, but because emotional intensity often feels like pressure to someone who already struggles with closeness. And for them, pressure and emotional safety rarely coexist in the same space. On the other hand, when you respond with calmness, grounded awareness, and self-respect, something very different is communicated. It signals stability. It shows that you are open to connection, but not emotionally dependent on it. That distinction matters more than most people realize in dynamics like this, because avoidant patterns are often not drawn to pursuit, they are drawn to emotional safety. This doesn't mean you suppress your emotions or pretend not to care. It means you stop letting fear or urgency shape your reactions in ways that create imbalance. You can acknowledge their return without rushing to define it. You can engage without over-investing. You can observe without spiraling into interpretation. When you stay emotionally steady, the dynamic itself begins to shift. The sense of urgency that often surrounds reconnection starts to soften. Instead of feeling like they are stepping into emotional pressure, they experience more space. And for someone with avoidant tendencies, space feels significantly safer than intensity. That safety does not guarantee commitment, but it does reduce the likelihood of immediate withdrawal. More importantly, it allows the interaction to unfold without being driven by panic, pursuit, or emotional overwhelm. This is where emotional self-regulation becomes powerful, not as a way to influence their behavior, but as a way to protect your own stability. Because when reactions come from anxiety or fear of loss, your emotional state starts to depend on their behavior. Their silence creates confusion. Their attention creates relief. Their inconsistency creates emotional instability. Over time, that pattern can quietly drain you. But when you remain centered, you break that cycle. You begin responding instead of reacting. You give space between what you feel and what you express. You stop treating early behavior as final truth and start observing consistency over time. It is also true that your response shapes the emotional tone of the reconnection. Not in a controlling sense, but in a relational one. If the connection is met with urgency and emotional pressure, it may reinforce their instinct to withdraw. If it is met with steadiness and clarity, it can create a more balanced environment. But neither of these outcomes should be about strategy or performance. The real purpose is not to manage them, it is to stay aligned with yourself. Because the moment you start performing emotional control to keep someone close, it becomes another form of self-abandonment. Real stability comes from something deeper. Not chasing reassurance, not rushing answers, and not letting uncertainty dictate your emotional state. You are not trying to secure someone who is inconsistent. You are learning not to lose yourself in the process of their inconsistency. And this is where the focus quietly shifts back to you. When someone disappears and returns repeatedly, it can start to center your emotional world around their timing. Their silence becomes waiting. Their return becomes relief. Their attention becomes validation. But over time, something within you changes. You begin to recognize that you are not the same person who experienced the first silence. You have already lived through uncertainty. You have already felt absence without explanation. And that experience leaves awareness behind, even if attachment still exists. That awareness is where your clarity begins. You start noticing your own patterns more than theirs. Whether you overextend yourself, whether you tolerate inconsistency longer than you should, or whether you remain grounded even when emotions are uncertain. Their return becomes less about them and more about what it reveals in you, your boundaries, your needs, and your emotional direction. And eventually, the most important realization emerges. Intensity is not the same as security. Being thought about is not the same as being chosen. Feeling something is not the same as building something stable. And no matter how real the emotions may be on either side, inconsistency cannot create emotional safety. So the question slowly stops being about whether they will come back again and starts becoming about what this cycle is doing to you. Whether it brings clarity or confusion, whether it strengthens your emotional foundation or weakens it, whether it helps you grow or keeps you waiting in uncertainty. Because in the end, the most significant moment is not their return. It is the version of you that exists after all of it, the one who has seen the pattern clearly and now understands that emotional stability is not something to negotiate, but something to choose. In the end, what this entire dynamic teaches you is not just about them, but about you. About what you are willing to normalize in the name of connection and what you are no longer willing to confuse with love. Because when someone comes and goes from your emotional space,